This happened about 6 years ago when I was 22. I had just dropped out of college after a rough patch in my life, family stuff, debt, and some bad decisions. I needed somewhere cheap and quiet to regroup. So I found this tiny one-bedroom rental on the outskirts of a small rural town in northern Oregon. The kind of place where cell reception is a rumor and your nearest neighbor is a half-mile down the road. The place was almost suspiciously cheap, $400 a month, month-to-month lease, all utilities included. Too good to be true. But when you're broke and desperate, you don't ask a lot of questions. The landlord was this guy named Harold, probably in his late 60s, real no-nonsense type. When I first moved in, he gave me a rundown of the property rules, which were all normal until the very end. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "Don't go past the back fence." Not ever. I laughed, thinking he was joking, but he didn't smile. He just repeated it. "Don't go past it. You hear something out there, you ignore it. Don't ask questions." It was weird, but I brushed it off. Thought maybe there was wildlife, or maybe he had an old meth lab back there or something. Who knows? The house itself was decent, kind of worn down, but clean and quiet. It backed up to a dense patch of forest. Pine trees that went on for miles, no trails, no signs, just a rusted chain-link fence marking the end of the backyard. About a week in, I started noticing weird things at night. It always started around 2 or 3 a.m. I'd be lying in bed, and I'd hear this low, vibrating hum coming from the woods. At first I thought it was the wind, but it was too rhythmic. It had a strange, pulsing quality to it, almost like chanting, but not in any language I recognized. I told myself it was nothing, just weird acoustics in the trees. Then one night I heard something new. Footsteps. Not animals scurrying. These were heavy, deliberate footsteps, crunching across the pine needles just outside my bedroom window. I turned out all the lights and watched from behind the curtains. But the darkness was absolute. The forest was like a black wall, swallowing my flashlight beam whole. Whatever, or whoever it was, didn't try to come any closer. After a few minutes, the steps faded away. The next morning, I checked for tracks, but the ground was dry and hard. Nothing. Then, a few nights later, I did something I now regret more than anything. It was 2:17 a.m. I remember because I checked the clock. The humming had started again, but louder this time. Clearer. I could hear voices now, definitely people. Not just humming, but actual words, chanted in a slow, steady rhythm. I couldn't make them out, but it felt rehearsed, coordinated. I don't know what got into me. Maybe it was boredom, maybe it was sheer stupidity, but I grabbed a flashlight and slipped out the back door. The moon was low and the air was dead silent, except for that chanting. I walked slowly to the back fence. My flashlight flickered, even with fresh batteries, which only added to the creep factor. I crouched down and peered through a gap in the chain link. What I saw still haunts me. About 100 yards into the woods, in a small clearing, stood a group of people, maybe 12 or 15, wearing identical gray robes. Hoods up, faces shadowed. They were standing in a circle, hands joined, swaying back and forth in perfect sync, chanting those same strange phrases. No lights, no torches, nothing. Just them in the dark. Suddenly, one of them raised their hand, and immediately the chanting stopped. And then, like a signal, they all turned to face me. Not just in my direction. They looked straight at me, through the dark, through the trees, as if they'd known I was there the whole time. I dropped the flashlight. It hit the ground and went out. I didn't stick around to find it. I ran, full sprint, back to the house, locked the door, shut all the blinds, and sat on the floor with a kitchen knife for the rest of the night. In the morning, I called Harold. I told him what I saw, expecting him to laugh or get angry. But instead, he just sighed. "You went past the fence, didn't you?" I said I hadn't crossed it, just looked through. He was quiet for a second, then said, "You didn't see anything. Understand? You keep your mouth shut and you'll be fine." I asked who those people were. His face went cold. "They've been out there longer than I've owned the property. They don't bother anyone who minds their business." He paused, then added, "Most people don't come back when they go looking for answers." That was enough for me. I packed up and left that afternoon. I didn't even ask for my deposit back. I don't know what that group was. A cult? Some weird backwoods commune? Maybe just people who really didn't want to be found. But I think about them sometimes. about how they moved in perfect unison, how they all looked at me without a word, like they knew something I didn't. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder what would have happened if I had taken just one step past that fence. This happened to me in 2019 when I was driving cross-country from Illinois to Washington State. I was moving out west for a job and figured I'd make a little road trip out of it, avoid major highways, take back roads, explore small towns, the kind of Americana you see in old postcards. On the third day, somewhere in northern Idaho, I was running low on gas and hadn't seen another car in over an hour. Just dense forest and narrow roads. I finally came across this tiny gas station in what looked like an abandoned town. 2 pumps, 1 flickering sign, and a little shack for a building. The place looked like it hadn't been renovated since the 70s, but I didn't have a choice. As I was pumping gas, I noticed a man standing by the entrance to the station. He wasn't moving, just watching me. He was tall, probably mid-40s, wearing faded denim overalls and no shirt underneath. Bald head, no expression, just staring. When I made eye contact, he gave me this slow, deliberate smile. It wasn't friendly. It felt performed, like he was mimicking what a smile should look like. I nodded awkwardly and went inside to pay. The cashier was a woman in her 60s, and the inside of the store was basically empty. No snacks, no drinks. Just a small register, a dusty shelf of random items, and a back door that looked like it led to a basement. She didn't greet me, just rang me up in silence. Then, before I could leave, she said, "Don't go west." I thought I misheard her. "Excuse me?" I said. She didn't look at me. She just repeated quietly, "Don't go west of here, not at night." I kind of laughed it off and said, "Okay, thanks for the advice," thinking it was just small town weirdness. I got back in my car and kept driving. About 20 minutes later, I noticed a sign, "Welcome to Carrion Falls, population 84. The town wasn't on any of the maps I'd looked at beforehand. It wasn't even marked on Google Maps when I checked offline. But I figured it was just one of those unincorporated towns people forget about. It was eerie. No cars, no people walking around. Every house had its curtains drawn, and many looked abandoned. And then, just as I was about to leave the other end of town, I saw the same man from the gas station, standing in the middle of the road. No car, no bike. Nothing around him, just there. I slowed down and swerved to go around him, and as I passed, I looked in the rearview mirror, and there were more people, lining the sidewalks, dozens of them, just standing there watching my car, no movement, no sound, like mannequins. I floored it. About 10 minutes out of town, I hit a sharp curve and slammed on the brakes. Someone had dragged a tree across the road. I knew this was bad. I'd seen horror movies. This was exactly how those stories start. So I threw the car in reverse, planning to backtrack until I saw something in my rearview mirror. Headlights, a line of cars, silent, no honking, no engine revving, just waiting. I froze. There was no signal out there, no way to call for help. My phone was as good as a brick. That's when I saw someone walking toward my car from the front. It was a different man, older, wearing what looked like a ceremonial robe, off-white, stained. His face was covered in soot or ash. He stopped maybe 20 feet from my bumper and held up something wrapped in cloth. He unwrapped it slowly, and inside was a small wooden mask, carved crudely, with black eyes and a mouth frozen in a scream. He tilted his head, like he was asking me to wear it. I didn't move. Then he started walking faster. I floored it and plowed straight through the edge of the fallen tree. It wrecked the front of my car, but I didn't stop. I drove on a bent rim for almost 6 miles until I reached a diner with a working payphone. When the cops came, they searched the area where I described, but there was no fallen tree, no town called Carrion Falls, and no gas station at that location. Nothing. They chalked it up to stress or exhaustion. Said I must have imagined it or gotten turned around. But I know what I saw. About a month later, I dug through some old forums for paranormal researchers. Not because I believed in ghosts or anything, but I was desperate for answers. I found a thread about closed communities in the Northwest. One user posted grainy photos of people in robes with soot-covered faces, wearing those same carved masks. They called them the Carrion People, a cult that supposedly vanished in the 1950s after law enforcement raided one of their compounds and found mass graves. But what if they didn't vanish? What if they just moved? And what if they don't want to be found again? This happened to me 2 years ago when I was working as a freelance photographer. I got hired to document a wellness retreat in the Colorado Rockies. The client found me through Instagram and offered to pay well, $2,000 for a 3-day stay, plus food and lodging. The place was called the Lumen Circle, and their whole pitch was about detaching from technology and returning to the self. I'm not really the meditation type, but money's money. So I said yes. They had a shuttle pick me up from a small airport outside Denver. The driver didn't talk much, just told me the property was about 2 hours into the mountains. He made me put my phone in a lockbox before we left. Retreat rules, he said. That should have been red flag number 1. By the time we arrived, it was almost sunset. The retreat was a cluster of wooden cabins built in a clearing, surrounded by thick forest. Everything was candlelit, no electricity, no cell towers, just mountains, trees, and absolute silence. There were maybe 30 people staying there, men and women, mostly in their 20s and 30s. Everyone wore white robes, and they all acted overly calm, smiling too much, talking like they rehearsed it. I tried to crack a joke with one guy during dinner, and he just stared at me like I'd said something in a foreign language. That first night, I stayed in a guest cabin with no lock on the door. The bed was clean, but the windows didn't have curtains, and I swear I heard someone walking around outside at 3 a.m., just slow, shuffling footsteps on gravel. I waited for the knock that never came. The next morning, I started shooting. They had these guided group sessions in the field, breathing exercises, yoga, sharing circles, pretty standard stuff until the last session of the day. They called it the binding. I wasn't allowed to photograph it. Everyone sat in a perfect circle while the leader, a woman named Mira, walked around sprinkling this weird gray powder into the dirt. She said it symbolized purity beyond self. Then she asked one of the guests, a teenage girl named Ellie, to come forward. Ellie looked nervous. Not like stage fright nervous, more like she didn't want to be there. Mira whispered something in her ear, and the girl nodded like she had no choice. They placed a blindfold over her eyes, and 2 of the men carried her into the woods. Everyone clapped. I asked another guest, "Where are they taking her?" He smiled and said, "She's ready." Ready for what? I wasn't there to dig deep. I was there to take pictures and get paid. But that night, when everyone else was at the communal fire pit, I went back to the edge of the woods. I followed a barely visible trail with just a flashlight and my camera. About 10 minutes in, I found something that made me stop cold. A cabin. Not like the ones at the retreat. This one was older, rotting, windows boarded up, door bolted shut with chains. It didn't match the rest of the property, and in front of it, a freshly dug hole, about the size of a person. I turned around to go back, and standing maybe 20 feet behind me was Mira. No flashlight, no sound, just standing there, barefoot, in the dark. She said, "You weren't invited here." I didn't say anything. I just walked past her as calmly as I could. But I knew, she wasn't alone. I didn't hear them, but I felt them. Eyes in the woods, feet in the shadows. Back at my cabin, my stuff was gone. My clothes, my gear, my wallet, gone. Only the white robe remained, folded neatly on the bed. I slept in my clothes with a chair jammed under the doorknob, heart racing until sunrise. The next morning, I told them I had an emergency and needed to leave. Mira smiled and said the driver would return the next day. In the meantime, she said, "Why don't you help prepare for Ellie's rebirth?" That's the word she used, rebirth. I played along, nodded, smiled. Then I waited until the middle of the night and bolted. I stole a key from one of the unattended utility sheds and hiked down the mountain until I hit a road. Flagged down a truck driver who took me to a ranger station. I reported everything. The sheriff said they'd check it out. But later, I found out that property is owned by a private religious organization and protected under all sorts of weird loopholes. I got my gear back in the mail a week later. No return address, just a box with my name on it. Everything was there except the memory card from my camera. They kept it. I still check the website every few months. It's still up, still recruiting, new photos, new faces, but never Ellie.